Hey everyone, welcome to today's Explainer. We have got a really fascinating journey ahead of us today. We're going to start by exploring the absolute cutting edge of ocean science. And then we're going to zoom out to confront some pretty sobering ecological truths. We are looking at the massive global effort to save coral reefs. Because, this isn't just a story about nature. It's a story of incredible human ingenuity, wild high-tech interventions, and ultimately the fundamental question of what it actually takes to bring a broken ecosystem back from the brink. Okay, let's dive into this. $10 trillion. That's a 10 with 12 zeros. According to data from NOAA Fisheries, that is the estimated global economic value that coral reefs contribute to our world every single year. Domestically, in the US alone, it's over $3 billion. But obviously, their value isn't just financial, right? Hundreds of millions of people rely on coral reefs for their food, their livelihoods, and for absolutely crucial coastal protection when major storms hit. They are quite literally the life support system for our oceans. So the stakes here, they couldn't be any higher. But despite all that immense value, we are facing a massive existential threat. Research from the Mars Coral Reef Restoration Initiative points out a terrifying trajectory. If we don't act right now, 90% of the world's coral reefs could be completely gone by the year 2050. Let that sink in for a second. 90%. We've actually already lost somewhere between 30 and 50% of the world's reefs. This level of habitat extinction would have just devastating consequences for global biodiversity and for those millions of humans who depend on these ecosystems every day. Which brings us to Section 1, the global coral crisis. Basically, coral reefs are facing a compounding assault. It's not just one thing. We're seeing warming ocean temperatures and ocean acidification driven by climate change, and that's combined with localized everyday stressors like overfishing, agricultural pollution, and coastal development. And if that wasn't bad enough, disease is just ravaging what's left. For a really grim specific example, we can look at Mote Marine Laboratory. They report that Florida's coral reef, which is 350 miles long, has lost all but 2% of its living coral cover in recent decades. Just 2% left. And right now, a devastating outbreak called stony coral tissue loss disease is decimating the slow-growing foundational corals that actually hold that entire reef together. So what are we doing about it? Let's move to Section 2. The science of rebuilding. First, let's quickly define the baseline vocabulary for this explainer. Historically, conservation relied really heavily on passive restoration. That essentially meant creating marine protected areas, keeping humans out, and simply allowing nature to recover on its own. But today, the threats are way too severe for that. We now have to rely on active restoration. This means direct, deliberate human intervention, spending time, energy, and serious resources to physically increase coral reef health, abundance, and biodiversity. Now, what's really interesting about this is where the whole idea of active restoration actually started. According to the New Haven Reef Conservation Program, Charles Darwin is credited as the world's first coral restorationist. Yes, that Charles Darwin. He noticed that corals dislodged by boat anchors usually died just rolling around in the sand, so he theorized that if he secured them, they might survive. He tested this by pounding bamboo poles into the sand and tying broken coral fragments directly to them. And guess what? It worked. Because corals can reproduce asexually, a secured fragment can actually regrow lost tissue and form a completely new colony. Well, today we've moved a bit past bamboo poles. The New Haven Reef Conservation Program outlines 3 foundational approaches to modern active restoration. First up is structural. That's building artificial reefs in areas that have been reduced to sand or rubble, where corals have absolutely nothing solid to attach to. Second is biological, culturing coral larvae or rearing fragments in nurseries and then transplanting them to boost living coral coverage. And third is physical, actually going in and altering the environmental conditions to improve coral health and speed up growth rates. Let's move to and see how this builds into our next part. Section 3, high-tech reef rescue. There is this incredibly inventive process developed by the Great Barrier Reef Foundation. It's known as coral IVF. During natural mass spawning events in the ocean, scientists and trained locals literally skim the surface to capture excess coral eggs and sperm. They then rear millions of these baby corals in specially designed floating nursery pools. This protects them from predators during their most vulnerable stage. How cool is that? Finally, they release these young corals back onto damaged reefs to repopulate them with completely healthy, genetically diverse offspring. But what happens if a species gets entirely wiped out in the wild? Well, the Great Barrier Reef Foundation is also utilizing cryopreservation. Think of this as the ultimate biological failsafe. Scientists collect small pieces of coral tissue, sperm, and eggs and carefully freeze them in liquid nitrogen. This literally stops all biological activity, preserving the genetic material indefinitely. So if a species goes extinct, we have a backup plan sitting right there in a freezer ready to thaw, propagate, and reintroduce into the wild in the future. Of course, growing corals in a lab or a pool is really only half the battle. Planting them efficiently in the ocean is just as critical. Fast-scaling tools are completely changing the game here. For instance, the Great Barrier Reef Foundation uses a low-cost stainless steel device called a coral clip to rapidly attach corals without needing any messy chemical glues. And Mars Coral developed the Mars system, which is a web of coated steel structures that can be rapidly deployed underwater. To put the sheer scale of this into perspective, recently, during an event called the Big Build in Indonesia, just 100 people using these tools successfully planted 30,000 corals across 2,500 square meters. And they did all of that in just 4 days. We are also literally using electricity to hack coral growth. Utilizing advanced mineral accretion devices like BioRock technology, scientists run a low-voltage electrical current through an underwater metal frame. This process of electrolysis changes the water chemistry right around the frame, raising the pH and causing carbonate salts to precipitate out of the water directly onto the structure. Because the structure is literally building a skeleton for them, the corals can divert all their energy entirely into tissue growth and immune defense. The result? They grow 3 to 5 times faster than normal. It's absolutely brilliant. And this brilliantly illustrates how we can combine physical machinery with natural biology. Over in Hawaii's Kaneohe Bay, reefs were being totally smothered by invasive algae that blocked out life-giving sunlight. NOAA's solution? The super sucker. It is exactly what it sounds like, an underwater vacuum cleaner used by divers to suck the invasive algae right off the reef. I mean, they are literally vacuuming the ocean floor. Then, as a brilliant follow-up, they release native algae-eating sea urchins to munch on whatever tiny bits are left over, perfectly restoring the ecosystem's natural balance. All of this technology is honestly awe-inspiring. Between coral IVF, biological freezers, electric biorocks, and underwater vacuums, it feels like we have all the tools we could possibly need to fix this. But this brings us to a massive narrative pivot for this explainer. We have to stop and ask a really hard, sobering question. Can planting corals actually save our reefs? Is all this incredible, futuristic technology enough to solve the root problem? Section 4. The true restoration reality. So, the crucial point is understanding the stark difference between simply adding corals and actually fixing systems. As the Coral Reef Alliance points out, growing and planting corals is highly visible, it's exciting, and it's very appealing. But if you plant pristine, lab-grown supercorals into an ocean area that is still completely plagued by wastewater pollution, sediment runoff, or overfishing, those new corals are going to face the exact same lethal pressures that killed the original reef. Without addressing the root causes, adding corals is just a localized band-aid on a gaping wound. True restoration goes far beyond just planting. It requires fixing the conditions that reefs need to survive in the first place. The Coral Reef Alliance shared a massive success story from West End, Roatan, in Honduras. By focusing heavily on community-led wastewater treatment infrastructure, they drastically reduced the pollution entering the ocean. The result? Coral disease at the reef dropped from 25% all the way down to 0%. Think about that. When clean water flows and fish populations are protected, reefs can often recover, rebuild, and even adapt to climate change largely on their own. Things like coral IVF and biorocks are vital tools for sure. They buy us much-needed time, they repair localized damage, and they preserve genetic diversity against total extinction. But they are supporting tools, not standalone solutions. I want to leave you with this really powerful thought from the Coral Reef Alliance. We cannot outplant our way to the coral reefs of the future. Protecting reefs at a global scale requires restoring the systemic health of the oceans around them first. So as we marvel at all this high-tech hope, we really have to ask ourselves, are we willing to do the hard, systemic, political work required to ensure these incredible animals actually have a hospitable ocean to grow in? It's a massive challenge, and I highly encourage you to look deeper into the systemic ocean policies being debated right now to see where this fight goes next. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer.